The sun was beginning to set over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Jack Reynolds, a 37-year-old veteran, walked slowly toward the town's animal shelter. His worn boots hit the pavement, a reminder of the weight of each step he had taken in his life since leaving the Army 2 years ago. He had been trying to find something to fill the emptiness, but there was a void that no job or therapy seemed to heal. Rex, his loyal German shepherd, the war dog who had been by his side on dangerous missions and after an injury had been forced into retirement. The shelter was small and simple, with rusty fences and makeshift dog houses. The smell of disinfectant hung in the air, mixed with the sound of scattered barking. Jack was there at the request of his older sister Emily, who believed a dog could help him cope with the traumas of post-war life. He had hesitated, but deep down something in IDE him urged him to take that step. As he walked through the narrow aisles, he observed each cage with a critical eye. Some dogs barked enthusiastically, wagging their tails in an attempt to grab attention. Others simply watched him silently, their eyes filled with melancholy. None of them, however, seemed to have that special spark he associated with Rex. Just as he was about to give up, a shelter worker caught his attention. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a German Shepherd in the back that might interest you. He came in a few weeks ago, but he's a bit special." Jack looked up, surprised. A German Shepherd? Without saying a word, he followed the young woman to a more secluded area. In one of the cages, lying in the farthest corner, was a large dog with black and tan fur. His posture was stiff, but his eyes showed evident weariness. Even so, Jack felt his heart race. He would recognize that dog anywhere. "Rex," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The German Shepherd slowly raised his head and looked at Jack, but there was no emotion in his gaze, no wagging tail, no attempt to approach, just an empty look, as if Jack were just another stranger. He doesn't recognize me," Jack murmured, taking a step back. His chest tightened as if something inside had broken, but then staring at Rex for a few more seconds, one thing became clear: he couldn't give up on this reunion. Jack and Rex have an emotional story that is just beginning, but what will happen next? Want to find out? Then go ahead and leave a like to support this journey and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the continuation of the story of overcoming and friendship. Jack stood still in front of the cage, unable to look away. Rex, the German Shepherd who once exuded energy and determination, now seemed like a shadow of the dog he had known. His eyes, once full of life, were now dark and distant. The scars on his back leg and one of his ears were visible marks from the battlefield, but there was something more, an invisible wound, something Jack knew well, as he carried the same kind of pain. "He's been through a lot," the staff member explained in a low voice. "He was found at a smaller shelter in another state. It looks like he was given up by someone who couldn't handle him. He suffers from anxiety and doesn't trust humans easily." She paused, looking at Jack hesitantly. "Do you know him?" Jack nodded slowly, his voice coming out in a barely audible whisper. "He was my partner, my best friend." For a moment he got lost in a wave of memories: the grueling training where they both learned to trust each other, the risky missions where Rex had saved his life more than once, and the nights when the dog was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And now there he was in front of Rex, and the dog had no idea who he was. The staff member carefully opened the cage. Rex watched, but made no move. Jack slowly knelt down, extending his hand. "Hey buddy, is me, Jack." His voice trembled, but he kept it soft. Rex tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand, but remained still, muscles tense. Jack felt a lump in his throat. He knew this wouldn't be an easy process. "Would you like to spend some time with him? We can take him to the playa," the staff member suggested, trying to ease the tension in the air. Jack nodded without hesitation. In the yard, the scene wasn't much different. Rex kept his distance, sniffing the air but avoiding any direct interaction. Jack watched every movement, trying to understand what the dog was feeling. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack made a decision. He looked at the staff member and said firmly, "I'm taking him home. No matter how long it takes, I'll bring him back." There was determination in his voice, an echo of the loyalty they had shared in the past. He knew that just like Rex, he too needed rescuing, and maybe this was the beginning for both of them. The drive to Jack's house was marked by an unsettling silence. Rex lay in the back of the truck, resting on a blanket Jack had laid out for him. The German Shepherd kept his eyes fixed on the window, avoiding any eye contact. Jack glanced at the rearview mirror from time to time, trying to decipher what was going on in the dog's mind. It was hard not to feel rejected, but he also knew that as veterans they both carried burdens that made them difficult to reach. When they arrived home, Jack parked at the entrance of his small property on the outskirts of town. The house was simple, surrounded by a large yard with a few trees gently swaying in the wind. He opened the truck door and called to Rex, but the dog hesitated. After a few seconds he stepped down slowly, taking cautious steps. Every movement was meticulous, as if constantly assessing the surroundings. Jack led Rex to the front door, opening it carefully. "Welcome to your new home, boy," he said, trying to sound cheerful, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Rex entered but stood still in the entryway, sniffing the air cautiously. He seemed suspicious, as if expecting something unexpected to happen at any moment. Determined to create a comfortable space, Jack had set up an area in the corner of the living room with a new dog bed, food and water bowls, and a few toys he'd bought on the way home. "This is your spot, Rex," he said, pointing to the corner, but the German Shepherd stayed where he was, ignoring the invitation. Jack sighed, feeling the frustration begin to weigh on him. As Jack was preparing something to eat, he couldn't help but remember the days when Rex would run to him full of energy and loyalty. The dog was different now. Wounded in a way Jack understood all too well. He looked at Rex, who was still standing in the same spot, staring off into the distance. "I know how you feel, buddy. I feel the same way." Lost, he murmured, more to himself than to the dog. That night Jack left the bedroom door open, hoping Rex would feel safe enough to come closer, but when he turned off the lights he heard the soft sound of paws on the floor. Rex didn't come to him but lay down near the bedroom door, keeping a safe distance. Jack smiled to himself. In the dark it was a small step, but to him it was the beginning of something bigger. The next morning Jack woke up to the soft sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. Rex was sitting near the door, ears perked, silently watching him. For a moment Jack felt a spark of hope. Maybe something familiar was coming back to the dog's mind. "Good morning, Rex," Jack said, stretching and forcing a smile, but the German Shepherd only looked away and slowly walked back to the corner of the room, determined to rebuild their connection. Jack spent much of the day trying to interact with Rex. He grabbed a tennis ball and threw it to him, but the dog didn't react. He placed a bowl of fresh food beside him, but Rex only approached it after Jack left the room. Each attempt at closeness was met with cold silence. Jack felt the weight of rejection, but he also understood it was more than that. It was fear, distrust, maybe even pain. That afternoon Jack decided to try something different. He grabbed a worn military vest he had kept in an old box in the closet. It was the same vest he wore during missions with Rex. As he put it on, the familiar smell of sand, sweat and the battlefield hit him. "Let's see if you remember this, boy," he said, taking the vest to the backyard where Rex was. Rex looked at the vest with curiosity, tilting his head slightly. For a moment Jack thought he had managed to stir some memory. He threw the vest on the ground and stepped back, giving Rex space to approach. The German Shepherd sniffed the fabric, his nostrils flaring as he analyzed the scent. For a brief moment his eyes seemed to lose their emptiness, but then he pulled back, retreating with his tail low. Jack sighed, feeling the hope fade away. Once again sitting on the porch that night, Jack watched Rex lying in the backyard, his eyes fixed on the stars. "I'm not giving up on you," Jack said aloud, as if speaking to the wind. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I'm not giving up now." He knew he was asking a lot, but he also knew that the bond between them was still there, even if buried beneath layers of trauma. As the air grew colder, Jack decided to give Re the space he needed. He went inside, leaving the back door open, and went to bed. Hours later the sound of paw scratching the floor woke him. Looking at the foot of the bed he saw Rex lying there, his eyes half closed. Jack didn't say anything, just smiled. In the dark the distance between them was shrinking. It was still small, but enough to reignite his determination. In the following days small moments began to appear, like cracks in the wall of distrust that separated Jack and Rex. On Monday morning, as Jack was chopping wood in the yard, he noticed Rex watching him from a distance. Head tilted, the German Shepherd kept his tail down, but there was a subtle curiosity in his eyes. Jack paused for a Moment wiped the sweat from his forehead and reached out to Rex. Want to help, boy? He asked in a playful tone. Rex didn't approach, but he didn't look away either. Later that same day, during a walk around the yard, Jack picked up a stick and tossed it lightly forward, not expecting much. To his surprise, Rex took a few steps toward the object, stopped, and then returned to where he had been. Jack smiled. "Ah, so you remember how to play. You're just pretending you don't." Despite Rex's shy response, that moment felt like progress. On Tuesday, Jack decided to take him for a walk. Rex's old ID tag was still stored away, so Jack cleaned it and attached it to the new collar. "Leighton, go for a walk," he said, adjusting the leash. Rex hesitated when Jack opened the gate, looking outside as if the world beyond the fence was hostile. Still, with a gentle tug, Jack managed to convince him to walk. During the walk, Rex seemed tense, always alert. He was constantly sniffing the air and kept his body stiff as though expecting imminent danger. Jack noticed this and spoke calmly. "You don't need to be like that, boy. We're safe here." He knew those words didn't mean much to Rex, but he hoped that over time the calm tone would start to make a difference. As they were heading home, something unexpected happened. Jack was taking off Rex's leash when the dog approached and sniffed his hand. Jack stood still, feeling his heart race. "That's it, Rex," he murmured, trying not to show too much emotion. He didn't move as Rex kept exploring his scent for a few seconds before pulling away again. For Jack, that small gesture felt like a sign that something inside Rex was starting to change. That evening, while Jack was preparing dinner, Rex lay on the rug near the kitchen. It wasn't exactly an invitation for affection, but the closeness was enough for Jack to feel that they were on the right path. He looked at Rex and whispered, "I think we're becoming friends again." How Rex didn't respond, but his eyes seemed less distant, as if a part of him was finally recognizing the man who had once meant everything to him. Have you ever had a moment where you felt a special connection with an animal, even after tough times? Share in the comments. We love hearing your inspiring stories. It was a gray morning and the mist covered the yard like a veil. Jack woke up early as he always did, but found Rex already awake, sitting by the living room window. The German Shepherd was staring out as if lost in thought. Jack approached carefully, as sensing that every interaction with the dog was a test of patience. "Remembering something, boy?" he asked softly, though he knew he wouldn't get an answer. After breakfast, Jack decided to bring something special for the day. From the back of the closet, he pulled out an old wooden box filled with items he kept since his military discharge. Among the medals, photos, and letters was a worn-out toy, a rubber ball that Rex loved during his breaks in the field. Jack held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the memories. Then he went to the yard where Rex was and threw the ball to the ground near the dog. Rex looked at the ball, his body immediately tensing. He sniffed the air as if the object carried a familiar scent, something buried in his memories. For a few seconds it seemed like he was going to ignore it, but then he stepped forward. He sniffed the ball, hesitant before stepping back again. Jack watched in silence, noticing Rex's internal struggle. "You remember this, don't you?" he asked, almost pleading. That day something felt different. During lunch, Rex stayed closer to Jack, following his every move. For the first time, he accepted food directly from his hand. Jack could hardly believe what he was seeing, but he kept his emotions in check, moving slowly and carefully. The German Shepherd ate slowly, keeping his eyes locked on Jack as if he was beginning to trust him again. Later, Jack sat on the porch with the ball in his hand, spinning it between his fingers. "Remember when you brought me this thing in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep?" He chuckled softly, remembering how Rex used to insist on playing even in moments of tension. "You were so stubborn, still are, I guess." Jack tossed the ball gently across the yard, not expecting Rex to react to his surprise. The dog perked up his ears and followed the ball with his eyes, though he didn't catch it that night. As Rex lay near Jack's bed, the veteran felt the distance between them continuing to shrink. It wasn't just the physical closeness, something deeper was happening. They were still both trapped in their own pain, but now they were starting to share a piece of the burden. Before turning off the lights, Jack looked at Rex and said, "We're almost there, partner. We're almost there." The sun shone brightly that morning, spreading light across the backyard. As Jack prepared for another day with Rex, he decided to try something new, recreating one of the old training routines they used to do on the battlefield with a whistle hanging around his neck and a rope in hand. Jack hoped the exercise might spark something in Rex's memory. Something buried beneath the trauma and time. Let's take it slow, boy, Jack said as he walked to the center of the yard. Rex followed at a safe distance, his eyes focused on every movement. Jack whistled and gave a simple command. Sit. For a moment Rex stayed still, but to Jack's surprise he slowly lowered his body and sat. Good boy, Jack exclaimed, a mix of surprise and enthusiasm in his voice. Jack then picked up the rubber ball and threw it a little farther. Fetch, Rex, he called, trying to recreate the energy of the past. Rex hesitated, eyeing the ball as if assessing his options. Jack stood still, waiting patiently. After a few seconds, Rex took a few steps toward the ball, stopped, looked at Jack, and finally picked it up with his mouth. A chill ran down Jack's spine. You did it, boy. As Rex walked back with the ball, something unexpected happened. He dropped the object at Jack's feet and looked up at him, staring in a way Jack hadn't seen in years. There was something there, a spark of recognition, as if the German Shepherd was remembering who Jack was to him. The vet felt his eyes welling up, but he kept his composure. He didn't want to scare Rex with his emotion, but he maintained his composure. He didn't want to scare Rex with his emotions. That moment marked a turning point for the rest of the day. Rex seemed closer, following Jack around the house and even allowing small gestures of affection. When Jack sat on the couch, Rex would lie on the floor next to him, something he had never done before. It wasn't just the training or the familiar objects, it was as if little by little Rex was letting his guard down and allowing Jack back in. That night, while Jack was organizing his belongings, he found an old photo of him and Rex in the field taken on the day they completed a difficult mission. In the picture, both of them were exhausted, but there was a gleam of pride in their eyes. Jack placed the photo on the table next to the bed and showed it to Rex. Look at this, boy, we made one heck of a team, didn't we? Rex looked at the photo for a few seconds before lying down next to Jack, closer than he had ever been since coming to that house. The sound of distant thunder sliced through the gray sky as rain began to fall over Jack's backyard. He looked outside, watching Rex stand near the porch, his nose pointed toward the horizon. It was as if the dog were in a trance, hypnotized by the dance of lightning and the drumming of the rain. Jack, holding a coffee mug, approached slowly. You've always loved storms, remember, he murmured, more to himself. Rex turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting Jack's for the first time in weeks. There was something different in that gaze. It wasn't the complete barrier of distrust that had once separated them. It was hesitation, yes, but also a glimmer of curiosity, a small sign that something inside Rex was changing. Jack's heart quickened. He knew there was still a long way to go, but moments like this gave him the strength to keep going. Deciding to seize the moment, Jack walked over to the cabinet and grabbed the old military whistle he had kept along with other items from his service. He knew it was a risk, but maybe the familiar sound could trigger some kind of reaction from Rex. Heading back to the porch, Jack gave 2 short blows on the whistle, the same pattern he used during missions to call Rex back to his side. The German Shepherd turned sharply, his ears standing up in alert. For a moment Jack almost believed Rex would run to him like he used to, but instead Rex only took a timid step toward Jack before stopping again. The spark in his eyes faded, replaced by a shadow of doubt. He lowered his head as if fighting something inside himself. Jack sighed deeply, putting away the whistle. He didn't want to force Rex to relive memories that might still be too painful. It's okay, partner, he said in a reassuring tone. White, go at your pace. Later, as the rain picked up, Jack prepared a dry blanket and a bowl of fresh water for Rex. He placed the items in the corner of the room, but this time chose not to push. He sat on the floor near the dog, but without trying to get too close. Just being there, present, was his way of showing Rex that he wasn't alone. Gradually Rex began to relax, lying down on the rug and casting furtive glances in Jack's direction. As night fell, Rex did something that surprised Jack. He slowly approached, his heavy breathing echoing in the silence of the room. He stopped just a few inches away from Jack, who stayed still, respecting the dog's space. Rex sniffed the air around the veteran as if gathering the courage to do something that to him was monumental. Then hesitantly he gently touched Jack's hand with his nose. The touch lasted only a moment, but it was enough to make Jack's heart race. You're coming back to "Me boy," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't try to pet Rex. Knowing that any sudden movement could break the fragile moment, he just stood there, letting the dog set the pace. When Rex finally pulled away, Jack felt a wave of relief and hope. It was a small victory, but to him it carried the weight of a reclamation. That night, as the storm raged outside, Jack found Rex lying at the foot of his bed. The dog wasn't completely relaxed, but he didn't seem as distant as before. For Jack, that was all he needed, the assurance that despite all the trauma and pain, the bond between them still existed, waiting to be rebuilt. The sun rose bright the next morning, casting a golden glow over the yard. Jack was on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching Rex slowly walk across the wet grass. There was something different about that morning. Rex's movements were less tense, and for brief moments he seemed less like a traumatized dog and more like the partner Jack remembered, determined to keep making progress. Jack picked up the old whistle once again and held it in his hands. It was a risky test, but he knew he had to try. Jack gave 2 short whistles, the same ones he had used the night before. This time Rex lifted his head almost instantly. His ears were upright and his whole body seemed on alert. Jack stayed calm, showing no signs of hurry or excessive expectation. "Come on, boy," he murmured in an encouraging tone. To his surprise, Rex took a few steps toward him, his eyes fixed on the whistle. The veteran felt a lump in his throat as he watched the German Shepherd finally approach with more confidence. Rex stopped in front of Jack, sniffing the air as if searching for something familiar. Jack, with slow movements, picked up the rubber ball he had used earlier. He held it in front of Rex for a moment, then gently tossed it to the side. For a brief second the dog stood still, but something seemed to change in his stance. With an unexpected burst of energy, Rex ran after the ball and brought it back. Placing it at Jack's feet, the veteran stood still, feeling his eyes fill with tears. That simple action, so small yet so meaningful, was proof that Rex was beginning to overcome his barriers. "That's it, partner, I knew you were still in there," Jack said, his voice choked. He picked up the ball again and repeated the gesture, and this time Rex ran faster, his tail wagging slightly as he returned. The progress felt almost magical, as if weeks of patience had finally paid off. For Jack, every step Rex took was a victory against the traumas they both carried that night. For the first time since Rex had arrived, he lay down next to Jack on the couch, his head resting near the veteran's leg. Jack didn't try to speak or move, he just stayed there, letting the silence speak for itself. It was a moment of reconnection, a trust beginning to be restored, and as he gently stroked Rex's head, Jack knew that no matter how long it took, he would never give up on the friend who had once saved his life. The morning began with the sound of birds in the yard, but inside the house something even more significant was happening. Rex was in the center of the room, his gaze fixed on Jack, who held a leash in one hand and a military vest in the other. "Today is the big day, buddy," Jack said with a hopeful smile. He had decided to take Rex to a special place, a nearby park that used to be their favorite spot during their days off from training. It was a final test, a chance to see how far they had come on the way to the park. Rex seemed more relaxed than ever. He was sitting in the back seat of the truck, his head slightly leaning out the open window, letting the wind brush against his face. Jack watched through the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of pride and relief. For weeks he had fought to bring back the dog who meant so much to him, and now this moment seemed like a milestone, just like the old times. "Huh?" Jack asked, not expecting an answer. When they arrived at the park, Jack let go of Rex's leash and grabbed the rubber ball again. The German Shepherd stood still for a moment, analyzing the surroundings, but instead of hesitating like before, he ran toward the ball as soon as Jack threw it. The two of them spent hours playing as if time and trauma had never existed. Jack increasingly felt that Rex was becoming the dog he once knew, but at the same time he understood that both of them had changed forever. They weren't the same as before, but that didn't mean they couldn't build something new. In the late afternoon, as the sun set, Jack sat on one of the park benches and Rex lay down next to him, resting his head on his owner's leg. Jack looked out at the horizon, inside a feeling of peace flooding his chest. "I told you I wouldn't give up, Rex," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. For the first time in years, Jack felt like a part of him had been restored. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a symbol of everything they had survived and Overcome as they headed home that night, Jack knew that the future, though uncertain, would be faced side by side with his partner Rex with his loyalty. And courage had found his way back to Jack's heart, and Jack in turn had learned that patience, love, and determination could heal even the deepest wounds. They were complete again, ready to face whatever came next. Together. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to support, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more touching stories like this. Your presence here really makes a difference.